What's up, everybody, and welcome back to One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. I'm pleased to be joined by Sam Davis, one of our
Making a little appearance here.
A little appearance.
I had to get on here. I had to get on for at least one segment.
Well, and you picked quite the segment to get on, my friend. Sam, if for those of you who don't know, I'm sure you do, listening to my voice his voice.
All my tons of adoring fans out there.
All of the fans. And you know where those fans stem from? Not only the New York Mets coverage, but Sam is also a college football aficionado to a level which I respect greatly. So it was smart of all of us and prudent of all of us to bring him on as we talk about this national championship game. TCU and Georgia, Monday, January 9th, 7:30 at SoFi Stadium out there in Englewood. Georgia defeated Ohio State to get there 42-41 in that semifinal. Stetson Bennett was very good, completed 23 of 34 passes, 398 yards, 3 touchdowns, only 1 interception. Defense struggled against C.J. Stroud. Meanwhile, TCU, they beat Michigan in that semifinal round, 51-45. That's a lot of points.
Yep.
Max Duggan was pretty good, 225 passing yards. Didn't want to give him too many yards there. 2 touchdowns. Amari DiMercato, though, he was lethal.
Yep.
17 carries, 150 yards, and a touchdown. Duggan had a Heisman-caliber year, 32 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. The highest passing efficiency in his collegiate career took place this season. Sam, I'm just going to give you the ball here. What are you thinking for this national championship game? Both teams had such unique stories to get there. I know how I'm leaning, but I want to hear what you have to say first.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get into all of it. Looking back real quick at the semifinals, I was just happy that they're both good games. I mean, I went into it thinking Georgia was going to destroy Ohio State, and Ohio State clearly proved me wrong with how well that C.J. Stroud played, with how well that that Ohio State offense played against a really good Georgia defense. And Georgia, all season long, their offense has gotten a lot better this year. Stetson Bennett has taken a huge step forward. He went from a game manager that won a national championship to now he was a Heisman finalist and really had a very solid year for them and that offense and Brock Bowers as well and what he's able to do at the tight end position. Georgia's taken a real step forward offensively. Their defense is still their strong suit. So I guess you could say you could be a little concerned with the effort against Ohio State and how C.J. Stroud was able to really pick them apart. And TCU, I mean, talking about a team that nobody expected at the beginning of the year, especially with Max Duggan, a guy who had heart surgery in the offseason. You know, I mean, we're talking about DeMar Hamlin. I mean, that's another scenario, a very scary thing with the heart, something that he went through in the offseason before playing football, this fall. And going into the year, he wasn't even a starter for TCU. He was the backup, won the starting role early on, and then finished the year as a Heisman finalist. And like you mentioned, Colin, a very, very good season, and now a national championship. TCU, I think, what impressed me most in their game, the semifinal against Michigan, every time Michigan climbed back into it, TCU continued to kind of stave them off and keep them away, where just TCU was in control of that game, really, throughout the entire game, maybe after the first drive or so, which was really, really impressive and I think shows how talented they are as a group. I will say I'm leaning towards Georgia because they're a more talented team. They're a better team. TCU's hot. TCU is playing, I would say, the performance in the semifinal was more impressive than Georgia's was, who kind of obviously held on and had a late, rally back to beat Ohio State. But it's hard to pick against Georgia with such a dominant defense. You got to think, at least for me, I have to think that defense is going to get back on the right track. But they're going to be challenged. I mean, TCU is a very good team, so they're going to be challenged for sure.
Admittedly, showing my cards here, I completely guessed wrong on the semifinals. I thought we were in for a Michigan-Ohio State final show.
I mean, I wasn't much better. Like, I picked Georgia. Picking Ohio State is like that move looked good because they were so close.
Right.
I mean, they honestly they should have won that game in my opinion. I think they had a chance. You can't settle for a 50-yard field goal when you have, I think it was 2 timeouts and 20 seconds left. Get another first down. Make that field goal a little easier, and then that probably goes in. And I think the whole country was rooting for Ohio State just because you want to see a made field goal right at midnight into 2023. Oof. I mean, that's you can't draw it up any better than that.
Probably a bad omen that it
it's not even that he missed it. It wasn't even close. That's a good point. It honestly might be a bad look for 2023.
Knock on wood.
But no, but my point was is that that Ohio State pick was, I would say risky, but they proved that they were definitely in that game. But I was with you with Michigan. I thought Michigan was going to beat TCU. I was shocked that TCU played that well.
Honestly, if Michigan had Blake Corum, I would think they would run over anybody. To me, he was that type of talent. You mentioned Stetson Bennett being a Heisman candidate. Blake Corum, even with what he did, should have been a Heisman candidate. I got to write about this not too long ago over at the Post. I was livid about that. How did they not go with him? I digress.
Yeah, Stetson Bennett had a good year, but he did not have a year of. He's the Georgia quarterback. He won a Heisman. Right. He won a national championship with them last year. So I guess they go with that and they say, hey, give him the nod there for. And he had a good story. He's a walk-on. Came from all that. Came from junior college to now. At that level with Georgia. But I get your point. I don't know if he was the most deserving. And everybody knew he wasn't going to win. It wasn't like he was there to.
It was a feel-good story.
Yeah, he wasn't there to win the award. I think that's pretty fair considering Caleb Williams was the guy. But overall for sure.
He got to go to a fancy dinner and hang out in New York.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty sweet gig for him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Who's passing that up, man? Honestly,
I know.
But I do think Hooker and Corum getting snubbed.
Yeah,
didn't love that. But as far as the national championship is concerned, I'm taking TCU.
Wow.
Reluctantly. I can't stress that enough. There is a big asterisk.
Now, is this do you think this is a high-scoring game? Do you have it as I think that's...
I have it
or do you have it as low? I'm very curious.
I have it as low scoring.
Okay.
Because Georgia's defense is very good against the run. They gave up the second fewest rushing yards per attempt this season in the nation. Ohio State was very pass-heavy. As we mentioned, with DeMercado, TCU is going to try and bring it with the running game. They don't necessarily want Duggan throwing 50 times, nor should they. If Georgia's able to really stave off the run, I could see Georgia winning this one. But if TCU is able to do what they did against Michigan, use the run to then establish things on play action, establish the pass, I like TCU to win. So I'm going with TCU with the caveat that they'll be able to set up some semblance of run game early and that Duggan will be able to pick apart the same stuff that Stroud was able to pick apart early in the game with Ohio State and Georgia.
I think it's really tough. I'm kind of split between that high scoring game versus a low scoring game because I think Georgia's defense will bounce back, and I think they're going to need to bounce back. But I think a lot of it too for TCU is you mentioned DeMercado in the game that he had in the semifinal, and that was because Kendre Miller was hurt, their starting running back, and I don't know what his status is, and I was just trying to look at that now. I haven't really heard a lot about it. I think it wasn't a major injury, so I wouldn't be surprised if he suits up and plays. But that's going to be big because that kind of dual threat rushing attack for TCU is big, and they're going to have to get that going. I think because it's not going to be all on Max Duggan, who's a very talented quarterback. We talked about how good he was in the semifinal. But this is a different defense than Michigan. This is a Georgia defense that is the best in football. And C.J. Stroud made that look completely foolish with how he was able to pick them apart. But C.J. Stroud is also, a top 5 potential draft pick. Max Duggan is not that guy. He had a really good year, but he's not, he's not that level talent-wise. I'm not saying he can't do it because I think he definitely can. And I think TCU is kind of riding that momentum. But I think ultimately these kind of runs, I think, come to an end eventually. And I think that Georgia being the more talented team that they are, and I think the key with them, last year they were really one-dimensional. Their defense was unbelievable, and their
great
offense,
recruiting.
Yeah, and then their offense wasn't at that level. They weren't really, This year things are a little bit more even. I think the defense might be slightly worse or taking maybe a step down at least over the last couple of games, maybe not across the season. And the offense has definitely taken a step up. So I think that is what makes them a really talented team this season, is the fact that Stetson Bennett can lead the offense down the field in a game-winning drive like he did, which is not really something you were confident in him doing a year ago.
The two quarterbacks in this one are really interesting.
It's really interesting. They're not the type of guys that are – it's not Bryce Young versus C.J. Stroud.
Two guys, Caleb Williams.
Or Caleb Williams, exactly. It's not these guys that are, we're going to be seeing playing on Sunday. These guys probably won't be playing on Sunday. It's a different kind of matchup, which I think is really cool. And I think the fact that TCU is in this championship is so exciting because we are so used to in college football, seeing the same teams, seeing those Alabama or seeing those, obviously Georgia has been there pretty recently, but and maybe Ohio State too. But seeing teams like TCU, seeing teams like Michigan, some of these other groups that are getting opportunities to play in these playoff games, I think is really awesome for the sport. I think it's great for the excitement level, and I know a lot of people are going to be tuned in Monday. I'm super hyped for this game.
Me as well, and I did want to push things there a little bit before we wrap up our Natty talk here. What do you think it says about the state of college football that a team like TCU and a team like Georgia, with those distinct programs, very different in how they operate, very, very different in terms of the types of recruits they attract, what does that say about the state of the game going forward?
Yeah, I think it's really good for it. I think we're coming to a stage in college football where super conferences are rising, and everybody's kind of joining the big ones like the SEC. Obviously, with Texas and Oklahoma coming into there, TCU's kind of proving that you can be in the Big Ten and still find success against these big time programs. Not the Big Ten, excuse me, the Big 12. But same thing with the Big Ten. Like you can be in these programs outside of the SEC, still find success. The Big Ten is going to be getting bigger as well. So I think that's what's so exciting about this is TCU, a team from the Big 12, not the Big Ten or the SEC, not these what will be super conferences, are finding success against these teams. Because I really do worry about, I think there's something to be said about the tradition of college football. The NFL is always going to be the NFL, and everyone's going to obviously love it for what it is, and rightfully so. But college football has a tradition that the NFL is different from, I will say. I don't want to say the NFL doesn't have it, but college football and the conferences and playing teams near you, I think something about that is exciting. And the crowds that come out for some of these games, make it unique. And I think that, as the game kind of changes and maybe moves a little bit away from that, something like this is very refreshing. Where a team like TCU that hasn't been in the playoff and hasn't really been relevant nationally at this level is getting a shot in that limelight. And I think they're going to prove to everyone that they belong and they fit with an SEC school. Because I picked Georgia, but I think this game is going to be close.
Always a treat. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Love me.